No announcements? If you're a senior, your thesis is due today for health sciences.
And you're here.
They have to be here. See, there's Dr. Bailey. And there's All right, so it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Alison Marchione. I always get it wrong. She graduated in 2011 from environmental science. Woo! Along with Colin, right? Jeff? 12. Yeah, all right. Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought you guys were the same year. Interesting.
There were only two of us in my year, so we get lumped.
Understandable, we only have one this year. And he's not here. No one's shocked if they know who it is. But anyway, she's coming back to you to tell you guys about what she's been up to since she left Wells and how she got where she is today. And so I know that you're going to talk more about where you are and all that, so I'm just going to let her introduce herself. And we will welcome you back to Wells. I would sing to you, but I don't know how to.
Thank you. As Jackie said, my name is Alison Marchione. I'm currently the Lake Shoreland Coordinator for the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. I think the last time I was standing up here, I was presenting my thesis 15-ish years ago, so that's a little bit crazy. And I'm really happy to be back on campus, so thank you for inviting me. And like Jackie said today, I want to focus this talk about my last couple of jobs and career choices coming out of Wells with an environmental science degree, because in 2011, when I graduated, it felt like there were a lot of options out there, and I had no idea what any of them were. And so I floundered a little bit trying to figure out what I was going to do with my career. And so I want to talk a little bit broadly today kind of about conservation and land restoration, because that is what I ended up doing. And then open it up so you guys can like ask any questions that you have about either my background in education, current jobs, the specifics of my presentation, really anything you want. So I'm going to try to go through my slides kind of fast so there's plenty of time to talk. So, hi. Like I said, my name is Alison. I graduated in 2011 from Wells College with a BA in environmental science and a concentration in biology. I think you do the same like concentrations now. And then I went on to Sacred Heart University, where I got my master's in environmental science and land management in 2014. After that, I was the land steward and then a programs director at the Upper Valley Land Trust in Hanover, New Hampshire, and I am currently the Lake Shoreland coordinator for the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, DEC, WSMD, LPP. There's a lot of acronyms in the government if you go work there. So I wanted to say, first off, I did get my bachelor's of environmental science from Wells. I had a fantastic time here. I learned a lot of things, and I just always have to plug it that I really feel like my liberal arts education has made me so much better at my science jobs, because I learned how to communicate and collaborate effectively with like lots of different kinds of people. And a through line of my career has really been that sort of collaboration and communication and doing a lot of science communication and outreach and education effectively to lots of different kinds of people. Those are all soft skills, as they say. But I learned how to do them so much better through being at Wells and taking non-science classes and science classes and just having to talk to people, be present in classes, et cetera. And then my little plug for my master's program that I did a professional science master's degree where they focused primarily on job skills. So it was not like an academic program. It was about learning how to run a mass spectrometer, also how to dig a soil pit, how to take lots of different sorts of samples and test them, and then also did have a research component, an internship component, and then a master's end project, capstone project. And that capstone project is a good way to start talking about my experience in the working world, because I did my capstone master's project with the Aspetuck Land Trust in Connecticut, where I worked on a restoration plan for a large, formerly commercial apple orchard that they had acquired. I designed a large pollinator garden meadow for the inside of that orchard, and that was my first experience working with a land trust and working in sort of land restoration. And it's also then where I would spend the next 7 years of my career, not at Aspetuck, but at land trusts in general. So I want to talk about land trusts just a little bit. Oh, geez, I'm trying to advance in 2 different places. Just briefly, since this is my former job, I wanted to talk about land trusts because I honestly had never heard of them until I was in grad school. So has anyone here heard of a land trust? Okay, can anyone tell me what they do? Who's not a professor here? Anyone? Want to guess? Yeah. Hey, she's got it. So yes, very, very broadly, land trusts protect land, right? So land trusts are nonprofit organizations that protect land, and at their core, they're protecting land from development. So they protect things like large forest blocks, wetlands, river corridors. In Vermont and probably a lot of other states, they also protect a lot of farmland. And so why are they doing this? Or how are they doing this? Well, they're nonprofits, so they accept donations of or they purchase the development rights to land. And what are development rights? Development rights are, that bullet point is not the right words here. Sorry. So the best way I've heard development rights described is like a bundle of sticks, right? And each type of right is one stick in the bundle. So you have water rights, you have mineral rights, you might have other sorts of rights, grazing rights, and then you have a right to develop a property that you purchase as you see fit, as long as it is within the laws of the place where you've purchased the land. And you can also sell those development rights or you can give them away. So when a land trust receives development rights, they create what's called a conservation easement that runs with the property in perpetuity. And what it means to run with the property in perpetuity is that every subsequent landowner of that property will have to follow the rules and regulations set up in that conservation easement. And so then the land trust uses this process of purchasing or getting donated development rights and creating conservation easements to protect important land resources. A conservation easement is a powerful, permanent legal document that can be tailored to meet the varying needs and goals of the landowners who are conserving the land. They often will specify the types and locations of activities that are permitted on that parcel of land, and then the future owners are bound by that conservation easement. So the first time I ever had this explained to me, I was in a class in grad school, and another student was explaining a project, and I was like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would you give up control over land that you own? Why would you like let someone else control your backyard? Like that just seems nuts to me. So can anybody think of a good reason why someone might do this? Throw it out there. No wrong answers. Sure.
Maybe either on their deathbed?
I mean, sure, that does happen. Anyone else? Dr. Bailey? It's legal protection for your land. Yep. Jackie?
To keep it wild.
Yeah, maybe you care about the environment and you like want to preserve habitat or something like that. So, I mean, yes, that's the first one. You love your land. You don't want to see it converted into condo developments. You understand the importance of conservation and biodiversity. Protection, especially with farming, protection of heritage, way of life, inheritance to the next generation. Also, land trusts are governed by the IRS, and there are extremely huge tax implications for donating development rights to your property. I'm not going to get too into the weeds on this either, unless somebody really wants to know what the tax laws in Vermont and New Hampshire are like, but basically you can deduct the entire value of your development rights, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars usually, from your taxes, the full amount up to 16 years. It's a huge, huge tax break. A lot of people do this. So if you ever have just 100 acres of land hanging out, consider it. But so those are the main reasons. And I just wanted to give that, because that was the part that was missing last time when I had this explained to me, was like, why would somebody do this? So those are the reasons why. So like I said, I was the land steward and a programs director at the Upper Valley Land Trust. Those are 2 different jobs that I had over the course of 7 years. And I want to just talk about what those jobs were briefly and how they worked and how they meshed with the degrees that I had. So the land steward job, a land steward is a job at every land trust. And there are land trusts, hundreds of them throughout the country. There's the Finger Lakes Land Trust there in Ithaca. I would love to work there if anybody knows anybody. Yeah, right. But so this is a job that is required at all land trusts. They're not always called land stewards, that was my title, but someone doing land management and easement monitoring. And so at the Upper Valley Land Trust, they had 56,842 acres of land under conservation easement. That's something like 550 individual easements, individual parcels. And land trusts are required to go to the properties every year and make sure that the easements are being upheld. So that means somebody has to go to the property, walk around, has already read through the easement, and make sure that what's written in the easement is what's being adhered to on the ground. So that's why these jobs exist at all different land trusts. And so the job required, interfacing with landowners, everyone from, your average dairy farmer to like tech millionaires with like huge mansions who also happen to have 100 acres of forest. So you learn to interface with a lot of different kinds of people. You make sure the properties are conforming to easements. You make land management suggestions. Often landowners don't know where to start with some of their land management, so you can make suggestions. We talk a lot about invasive species removal. And then there's easement enforcement if someone is doing something that is contrary to their easement. That happened maybe 5% of the time. And then at the Upper Valley Land Trust, they also owned over 5,000 acres of land. And so I was heavily involved in land management, which was mainly recreational management, trail systems, invasive species management, some forestry activities, a lot of volunteer management, event assistance. And I will say, I learned a lot of things with both of my degrees, but I didn't become a very good naturalist until I had this job. Because to be a very good naturalist, you have to spend just a lot of time in the woods with people who are also very good naturalists to kind of learn what's going on in the woods, understand what you're seeing. I was going to bring 2 books that I wanted to show you guys, and then I forgot to bring them. But Reading the Forested Landscape by Tom Wessels and Naturally Curious by Mary Holland are both like really great resources for learning to like be in the woods, see something, and know what that something means. Like you see a tree tipped over and you can infer from context clues what happened, or something like that. So those are both great resources if anyone here is interested. Those books are fantastic. And I will say, the land steward job was great. It was also very taxing. I spent most of my time outside in all weather conditions, in all seasons, including Vermont winters, by myself. I used to joke that I got paid to hike, which was true, and it was great usually. And I've run into possibly every kind of wildlife that you can run into in the woods. People always ask me about, like, am I afraid of bears? Am I afraid of coyotes? And I'm like, no, honestly, the worst thing that ever happened to me was I ran into a bull moose during mating season. And they are scary. So don't approach moose ever. But especially in September and October, they are very aggressive. So that was my land steward experience, and those jobs, like I said, they're usually entry level. They're a great way to get involved with land trusts or any kind of nonprofit work. If you're coming out with an environmental science degree and you want to spend a bunch of time outside in the woods, I highly recommend it. After a couple of years of doing that job, I was promoted to the programs director at the Upper Valley Land Trust. These are sort of the things that I was responsible for, which is basically everything involved in running a nonprofit. And some of it was great and some of it was really boring. I don't super recommend getting into donor relations. Those are not fun. But I don't want to talk about all of the minutiae of this because it really doesn't have anything to do with my degree. But I do have 2 areas that I worked in while the programs director that I think were very interesting. I'm very proud of them. And I think they did utilize my degree a lot better. So the first one that I want to talk about is the UVLT Food Pantry Garden. So you remember how I said UVLT owned over 5,000 acres of land. And they used a lot of that land for recreation. A lot of hiking paths, bike paths, cross-country skiing, stuff like that, trying to get people outside. But one of the goals of the land trust was to use the land that we owned for the good of the whole community. And while recreational trails are great, they're only meeting one need, and in some areas, they're only meeting the need of a certain subset of the population that, say, has a fancy mountain bike, or can take time off from work to go hiking. So we wanted to use our land for something that would benefit a wider swath of people. And so I came up with this idea that we use some of our land for a food pantry garden. So we partnered with local food shelves and soup kitchens, and we grew a lot of vegetables. So in the time I was there for 3 years, we grew 9,000 pounds of food, which is 4.5 tons of food. And we utilized volunteers to help grow food and get it to our neighbors in need who are food insecure. We also partnered with the Abenaki Land Link program. If for anyone who doesn't know, the Abenaki people are the indigenous people of Vermont. And the Nulhegan Band of the Coosac Abenaki Nation had asked nonprofits to partner with them in this program where they would give us indigenous seeds for things like beans and squash and corn, and asked us to use our land to plant and grow those vegetables and then donate the vegetables back to the tribe for the exclusive use of the Abenaki Nation. This was a fantastic program to be a part of. It really expanded our ability to reach people and provide food for them, and it was just a lot of great connections were made with some really cool people. So this is a program that I was really proud of and that has continued on since I left UVLT. The second thing that I worked on that I really enjoyed was Field Notes Friday. This was born out of the pandemic, so we were all at home in our houses, and I started this. It started on Instagram and then moved to Instagram and YouTube, but it was a series of short naturalist videos that I produced weekly on Fridays, where we talked about whatever was going on outside. So there's tons of different things here: bald eagles, bobcat tracks, sumacs, and all sorts of stuff. And this was a great program for me personally because it got me outside looking for things to talk about. And it's one of the ways that I feel like I utilized my ability to communicate effectively with people. And especially during the pandemic, it was very popular video series to the point where I would go places and they'd be like, "You look familiar, do I know you?" And I'd be like, "I don't think we know each other." And they would insist, and I was like, "Do you follow UVLT?" And they'd be like, "Field Notes Friday." I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." It was weird, but it was really fun to do. I really enjoyed it, and it was a great way to utilize some of those naturalist skills when we were all kind of stuck inside. And that's all I'm going to say about land trusts, because I have an awful lot more to say about the work I do at DEC as the Lake Shoreline Coordinator. I'm happy to take any questions about land trusts or nonprofit work or anything like that. I could take them now or at the end if anyone has any. All right, I'll just keep going. Lake Shoreline Coordinator at Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. About 2 years ago, I decided it was time to stop working in nonprofits for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons was I did want to do some more science-related work. I had been doing a lot of communications and a lot of marketing, which was rewarding in its own way, but wasn't really utilizing my degree to the full extent that I felt like it could. So I moved on to Vermont DEC. And so I work in the Lakes and Ponds program of the Watershed Management Division of the Department of Environmental Conservation of the Agency of Natural Resources. And the Lakes and Ponds program does a lot of different things. And I thought I would really quickly go over what the different sections do and then really dig down into what I specifically do. So we have an entire monitoring section that does long-term water quality monitoring on Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog, which are our two biggest lakes, and they're also international with Canada. So that involves a lot of collaboration with the Canadian government. And then we also do inland lake. Inland lakes are just the lakes that are completely surrounded by Vermont and not international or interstate. I should say Lake Champlain is also New York, on the border with Vermont and New York. And so those long-term monitoring projects are testing for phosphorus, nitrogen, organic carbon, chlorophyll, base cations, alkalinity, total suspended solids, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, and pH. You can tell the person who is doing this work is the one who gave me that list so that you would all know that's what they're sampling for. Our lake assessment program samples for spring phosphorus during turnover in all of our inland lakes. We have a lay monitoring program that works with volunteers to test for Secchi depth and total phosphorus and chlorophyll in water samples. And we do have a volunteer cyanobacteria, which is blue-green algae, monitoring just to know where those blooms are happening and when they're also not happening. Because cyanobacteria is a really hot button topic in the lake world. Our aquatic invasive species program provides educational materials and technical assistance. Also does some monitoring and some prevention with their Vermont Invasive Patroller program, which is a detection program, and their public access greeter program, which is literally paying people to sit at boat launches and yell at people to clean their boats so that they don't spread invasive species. And finally, our shoreland section, the shoreland regulation section, issues shoreland and encroachment permits because development is regulated within 250 feet of a lakeshore in Vermont. And they also do encroachment permits, which are for things like docks and walls and boathouses. I'm technically in the shoreland section, but I don't do any of these things. I do something completely different, and I'm the only person in the whole state who does it, which sounds like a brag, but let me tell you, it is hard to be the only person in a state doing your job. So I'm the Lake Shoreline Coordinator for Vermont DEC. I run the Vermont Lakewise program, which I'm going to go over in a bit of detail. I'm the project manager for our lake watershed action plans, which I will also go over in some detail. And then I'm the state lead on all lakeshore restoration and bioengineering projects. So we're going to talk about those a little bit too, though there is definitely not enough time in this science colloquium to go over everything. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Lakewise program. It's especially interesting as I was driving here today. I drove around from the other side of Cayuga Lake and was looking at the shoreline to kind of see what I thought of it now that I'm more aware of what good land management around lake shores is like. And New York is very different than Vermont just in terms of topography, so it's a little bit hard to get a good read on it. But anyway, the goal of the Lakewise program is to establish a culture of lakeshore living that is proven to protect the lake using stormwater best management practices. Lakewise is an initiative of the Agency of Natural Resources, meaning that it's run as a government program. And properties that are eligible for participation in this program include state parks, town beaches, private homes, and businesses, basically any land that is on a lake shore. So why does the state of Vermont invest a lot of time and money in this assessment program? Well, we have something of a problem in Vermont. Before 2014 and the Shoreline Protection Act was put into place, there was almost no regulation about development along Vermont's lake shores. And so I know, is anybody here from Vermont or like been in Vermont? Hey, there you go. I think of Vermont as someplace that's very environmentally friendly. So to learn that there were no regulations about development on lake shores until 2014 was kind of a mind-blowing experience for me. But it's true. So there were a lot of really poorly developed parcels of land around Vermont's lake shores. Vermont also has some of its highest development density around our lakes. So we're obviously a really rural state. We do have one kind of big city, kind of. And, but no, the most dense development is around our lake shores because there were just no rules about it. So we also know that poor development and shoreline alteration will decrease habitat, it increases instances of shoreline erosion, and it allows for the carrying of pollutants freely over land to enter the lake. So when the Shoreline Protection Act was passed in 2014, Vermont entered this period of shoreland restoration, and the Lakewise program was really developed as sort of a sister program to that act. The Shoreline Protection Act regulates new development around lake shores, and the Lakewise program helps influence current landowners' management of their property. So it's a voluntary program because all that development was already grandfathered in. That is the gist of the program. And I just want to say the National Lakes Assessment Study, which is an EPA study, showed that Vermont ranks the worst in the nation for lakeshore disturbances because of the extensive shoreland clearing that happened prior to 2014, like that. A lot of Vermont's lakes were developed heavily prior to 2014. That development looks a lot like this. It's really close to the water. There's very little vegetation, and there are some pretty poor stormwater practices. So this is where the Lakewise program comes in. So What is Lakewise? It's a free stormwater erosion and assessment tool that offers technical assistance, and we can pair landowners with funding resources to make changes to their properties. There's a ton of clean water money in Vermont right now to make changes to properties if people are willing to do it. So the Lakewise program aims to inform, teach, and encourage change in the current lakeshore development practices to ones that are a little bit more lake friendly. How does it work? The Lakewise program is actually based on social sciences. So we know from social science that we're not influenced by what our family is doing. We're not really influenced by what we see on TV. We are extremely influenced by what our neighbors are up to. So the program works because we award properties that are using good stormwater BMPs and good management strategies as model properties. They display that sign prominently. It's big, it's like that big. They display it usually on their dock or shoreline, and their neighbors can see that they've been acknowledged by the state as being a good property. And so then we hope that their neighbors are influenced to start managing their properties in a way that is better for the lake. And shockingly, I'm always shocked when social sciences, right? It works, it really works. Like, people get crazy about this stuff where they're like, they want that award. Like, what do they have to do? And it's amazing that it works. But yeah, cumulatively, we increase the health of the lake through our individual actions. And I just want to say, I keep bringing up stormwater BMPs or shoreline BMPs. The thing that we recommend most often across the board, everywhere we go, is more vegetation. Taking out natural shoreline vegetation and putting in things like turf grass. I'm sure you've all seen big open lawns right down to the lake, nothing there. That allows for waves and ice to start eroding at the shoreline because there's no roots holding it in. Grass has extremely shallow roots, doesn't do anything to really hold it down. So you're getting waves and ice from the lake, and then you're also getting water, usually coming down a steep-ish slope. At least in Vermont, most things are on a steep slope, right down to the lake, carrying sediments and salts from the road, going over your lawn, maybe carrying your dog's waste with it, all sorts of bad stuff. So we often are suggesting more vegetation just as a way to slow and filter that stormwater. There are also sort of more like man-made BMPs that would include things like ditches and culverts for driveways, rain gardens, catchment basins. I didn't want to get too much into the different types of BMPs, so I'm happy to talk about it. And I just wanted to really quickly go over why do we care if water goes into water? I get this question from landowners all the time who are like, why does it matter if the rainwater goes into the lake? Like, it's water, it goes into the water. I just kind of covered that a little bit, but stormwater that moves over land can carry lots of different things in it. The main issue in freshwater aquatic habitats is phosphorus. Phosphorus is bonded usually with sediments, and so when those sediments are washed into the lake, suddenly there's a lot of phosphorus in the lake, and phosphorus is the limiting nutrient in aquatic systems, and it is something that all of the aquatic plants need to grow. So when you have too much phosphorus, you get too much aquatic plant life, which can include algae, which includes blue-green algae and cyanobacteria, which nobody likes and wants around because some types of cyanobacteria are toxic, and it's really hard to know which ones are the toxic ones and which ones aren't. So anytime there's a cyanobacteria bloom, the recommendation is to stay out of the water. And so then also when you have too much phosphorus and too much plant growth, you might end up with not enough oxygen in the water, which can cause eutrophic conditions, which then it is a feedback loop. So we're really trying to nip too much phosphorus in our lakes before it gets too high and too unable to go backwards. And so what we're trying to do is to slow stormwater down before it causes erosion and stop sediments from reaching the lake through slowing and filtering the water so that the water that does run into the lake is clean without having any nutrient pollution or other kinds of pollution. Okay. We evaluate properties in 4 categories: driveways, structures and septic, recreation areas, and shoreline. Participants are provided with technical assistance to make their properties as lake-friendly as possible. The assessments and technical assistance they're free for the public and they're voluntary. So there's no regulatory aspect of this. So you can ask me to come to your property, spend 2 hours doing an assessment, spend a couple more hours writing a report, and then be like, no, I don't want to do it, which is fine. I make it known all the time. It's fine. I'm happy to do it because you know what? In 2 years, maybe you want to do it. Who knows? Maybe it's a money problem. Maybe it's you need to wait for your ornery old uncle to die before you can make changes to the property. Who knows? And then if the property passes all 4 of the categories in the assessment, they get the Lakewise Award. That's the Lakewise Award right there that can be displayed prominently on lakeshore properties. Any questions about the Lakewise program? Super interesting stuff.
I want that.
You want that award? Do you live on a lake?
No.
Well, I'm glad that I can sell it then.
You can sell them.
All right, so I guess I'll go on to talk about Lake Watershed Action Plans. So the Lakewise program is a voluntary program that, that landowners can participate in individually. A Lake Watershed Action Plan is different than the Lakewise program because it's DEC going in and saying this watershed seems to have a problem, there's too much phosphorus in the water, there's too many nutrients, what is causing this problem? And then we look at the entire watershed to see where those point or non-point sources of pollution are coming from. So it's an assessment and planning tool. The goal of it is to identify the threats to the lake. We're answering the questions of what are the issues that are threatening the health the most and what can we do about them. And in the end, the product of these Lake Watershed Action Plans is basically a to-do list for the lake and for the watershed where they can make changes and implement projects in order to curb some of the nutrient loading that's happening. Why are we doing this? All the same reasons we're doing the Lakewise program. We know that there's poor development around our lakes, and we're trying really hard to solve some of those problems and to keep our phosphorus levels low. We do have a lot of oligotrophic lakes in Vermont, which are just low nutrient, very clean, iconic lakes. I think that's not one of them, but I have a picture of one of them somewhere here. And we want to keep them that way. Vermont is, you know, a big tourist state, and our lakes bring in a lot of recreationalists, boaters, users, anglers, and we want to keep our lakes as clean as possible. So it's a whole watershed approach, like I said, and it's just a holistic way of looking at the lake. We're looking at shoreline sources, stream sources, and roadway sources. Shoreland, as we've talked about, those areas of erosion are usually due to shoreline development practices that are too close to the edge of the lake and that remove all the vegetation. In Vermont, our roads along lake shores are like there's this much space, like that's the lake and this is the road. They're really close. It's terrible. And a lot of the time, waves or ice will start pushing underneath the road and start scouring out the sediments under there and undermining the roads. So that's one issue, as well as stormwater coming off of roads, especially paved roads, especially ones that are salted in the winter. And then streams are often going to show you problems that are happening further up in the watershed, such as forest sediments coming down streams through forestry or from agriculture. Agriculture gets a lot of dings for clean water stuff. There have been huge strides in Vermont in the last 10 years to make our farms more sustainable for water quality. And like I said, the outcome is a prioritized list of projects. Projects look a lot like this. So like I said in this here, I didn't actually say it, but there's a prioritized list of projects, and then there are also some 30% designs that come out of these that are what I spend a lot of my time working on. And so this is a 30% design for a boat launch. And what you can see here, does this have a thing? Yeah. So the blue lines here are how the water moves across the property. This is the drainage area, this is the boat launch, and that's the little paved launch area. And what this project was proposing was a stone-lined ditch here going into a rain garden and a catchment basin here. This was, I'll show you the before pictures in a minute, but this was just grass. This is the boat launch. They were suggesting putting in a drainage, what do they call it? A drainage trench here, a trench drain. And then this was the ADA accessible paved walkway down to the dock. So this is the side view. I thought it might be interesting to see these engineered designs. It was not something I ever really encountered until I was doing this job and then was like, what the heck is a 30% design? 30% design just means it's 30% finished. So there's another 70% of this design that would have to be done, specific measurements, et cetera. This is like a proposal. This is the before pictures. This was on Lake Dunmore. And which one of these did I press to make the thing happen? There we go. So this is that area where they wanted to put in the rain garden. It just had a bunch of boulders to keep people from driving over it, and the grass was mowed and weed whacked all the way down to the edge, and then the boats are put in right here. This is the opposite side of this boat ranch, so it's like over here. Same thing, just some rocks. You can see how the stones on the drive, they get moved into the grass and eventually down into the water. This is a picture of that project when it was in progress. So they had dug these areas out and lined them with crushed stone of various different sizes. And then they were going to put topsoil in and plant native plants for a rain garden on both sides here. This is another sort of in process, but a little further along. So coming out of that rain garden is this little drainage ditch, with the idea that the water sits in the rain garden and sediments go to the bottom, stop being suspended in the water, and then the water can come out of these ditches clean and into the lake. And this was the drain that goes across the parking lot, so that any water that's coming straight down the parking lot will go into this drain that then goes into this rain garden. So that's how that works. And then these are some pictures with vegetation growing up. It's not, these pictures were not too long after the rain garden was planted, because this all happened, I want to say, in like July this year. So there was some time for plants to establish. But in the coming years, this will be a much more verdant garden with native species. Some of them are flowering. They're all great for habitat. I do focus a lot on phosphorus and water quality, but also because we're suggesting so much additional vegetation, we're creating a lot of habitat on our lake shores, which is important for wildlife. It's important for creating food for wildlife and habitat for wildlife, and also for shading the shallow water area. Because with climate change, we're having much warmer, much wetter summers, and those shallow water areas are becoming too hot for a lot of the types of fish that like to exist in them. So having shaded areas where the water might be slightly cooler is really important for that in-lake aquatic wildlife. And this is my last slide, I think. So I just wanted to show, we do suggest bioengineering techniques as well. This is for significantly eroding shoreline, where just putting plants in is not going to be enough. We literally have to rebuild the shoreline. So these are called encapsulated soil lifts. They're made with coconut fiber rolls and blankets, and inside of that blanket is topsoil. And then you plant these plants directly into the topsoil, basically creating a new shoreline. Here we have an example of live staking, which is when you take willow stakes. Willows have an enormous quantity of rooting hormones in them, and you put them into the ground and they will just grow. And they have insane root systems that really work well to hold in the soil. So often this will have been regraded, and then willow stakes are put in to hold it. And then over here, this is a fiber coir roll, same as the one here, but it's just the roll without the blanket. And that allows like waves. It's basically, instead of using hardscaping like rocks or a seawall, it uses a soft and biodegradable material to stop erosion so that the plants behind it have time to grow and establish their root systems and grow in. And that basically allows for there to not be as much erosion. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions you guys have about any part of it.
We did this first.
Okay.
Question.
So here in New York, we have a lot of municipalities around lakes, and some of them have been better at that, but it's not mandated, so where you're able to identify a source pollution from a homeowner, can you mandate it under the watershed plan repair?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about septic a lot, and truthfully, in DEC, all of the residential wastewater is in a different division. So that's part of the issue, but their stance is that if you have a permitted system, it should, like within the last 30 years, it should be sited far enough away from the water that if it's working, it won't be causing a problem. But it's not something, unfortunately, that we at the Lakes and Ponds program can deal with because it's just out of our jurisdiction. So.
Colin?
Alison, what do you think students should know about master's programs?
So a lot of things. I mean, it really depends on what you think you want to do. And I knew that I didn't want to go into academia because I didn't. And yeah, man, that looks hard. And so, I mean, things to know are there are master's programs that you can get paid for. Like, you don't have to pay for a master's program. I know at my job at DEC, I've got several coworkers who are a little bit younger than me who are getting their master's programs 80% paid for by the state of Vermont. I didn't know that. I paid for my master's program. But I do think if you're interested, there are master's programs out there that do, like I said, like mine, focused on job skills and training to learn how to do a lot of the things that you need to do without having to do a bunch of research also, which if that's something you're interested in, I think it is valid. I also think when I graduated, a lot of jobs required a master's degree, and I don't think that's necessarily the case right now. Like the land steward job that I had that paid $35,000 required a master's degree in 2011, or in 2000, whenever I started there. And they don't do that anymore. It's just the job market at the time there were so many people applying for jobs that having a master's degree would put you ahead of things. I would suggest applying for jobs first, honestly, and if you can't get a job, then go back to school. So that's what I would say. And I enjoyed doing my master's degree, so it was fun.
You guys have a question? Yeah, was Lakewise specifically only for Vermont, or was it like a more populated thing for other states?
So the Lakewise program in Vermont was modeled after the Lake Smart program from Maine. They originated it. I have had several conversations with the New York DEC about how they could possibly implement a similar program. The difference between New York and Vermont is that Vermont has 800 lakes and ponds and New York has 7,600 lakes and ponds. So you couldn't hire just one person for all of New York like you can do in Vermont. So I do think that there is a very slow moving push towards having more programs like this. I also think other states had better regulation around development. That is the big problem that Vermont had, was just allowing all sorts of crazy development. Yeah?
I don't know if it's like a stupid question, but like, have you guys, I know that a portion of this you said is like also like residential because they live right on the lakes. I'm wondering if you looked at also beachfront houses that are like right on the ocean, because I know that that'll cause issues also with pollution with people living on the beaches there. So I was
absolutely
curious if you've even looked at those.
So I have not, because there's no ocean in Vermont. I don't want to say it's a stupid question. I did my master's in Connecticut where there was ocean, and we did a lot of beach restoration work and shoreline restoration work there. It is slightly different because bigger waves, tides, etc. There's just some differences, but a lot of the upland stormwater management is the same, like trying to keep water from flowing directly into the body of water. Yeah.
And with you, do you do a lot of traveling?
Yes. I do an insane amount of driving, and I try to make that as what's the word I'm looking for? I try to do as many site visits in one day in one place as I can. It is a lot of driving, and the lakes are not evenly distributed throughout the state. So unfortunately, a lot of them are not close to where I live. But yes, I do. State pays for it. I don't have to drive my own car. That was nice. Yeah.
How do you start getting into like government jobs?
Honestly, that's a really good question. And so when I started out right out of school, it was all about making connections and like who you knew and doing some networking. So I actually volunteered for the land trust before I worked there. So I would be like, see, hey, look, I'm great. You should hire me. Once I had more of a job history, getting into the government was not difficult. I did a couple of I interviewed for this. This was the first government job I applied to, and I got it. So, and I think that all has to do with like job market. It has to do with skills, and having a good resume, I would say. And then if it's your first job, it's networking. That has been my experience. I don't know if you guys have similar experience, but that was what worked for me. There's a lot of jobs in Vermont if anyone's graduating and wants to move.
So you guys use these opportunities for networking?
Yeah, networking. Come talk to me.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why we bring in the speakers, so that you guys can see who you should talk to.
And I also say I hire 2 summer temps every year. So if anyone is interested in getting into the government.
You should send me those, and that way I can shout.
Yeah, you want to come work for Lakewise? It's really fun.
Other questions?
Not that I know of, but I wouldn't put it past it. There's people on these lake associations, lake people.
Are a different breed sometimes. Like they're very interesting people. I get to meet and work with very interesting people. Yeah.
So not only do you have to do the science, then you actually have to do the people relations.
Oh yeah, I do a lot of talking to people. I do a lot of outreach, a lot of communications. My former coworker used to say we work with the great bell curve of humanity. Like most people are great and they're in the middle, and some people are really great and some people are not. But they're few and far between. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Do you have connections in California?
For example.
For example.
Per se, if some student were to be from California.
I don't know. I would have to think about that. I might not, but I might know people. We'll see.
Nora, did you have a question?
Yeah. How do you balance like home and like self-life while having to travel so much for your job?
Yeah, so the nice thing about Vermont DEC is that we're all work from home still. So I live an hour away from my office, which I don't go to. So that really helps with work-life balance. It also helps that with this specific job, if I work really long days during the summer, if I'm working 12-hour days, I get comp time for it, so I can either take that time off later in the week, I can save it and use it for a vacation later. I have actually found working for the government to be so much better with work-life balance than working for a nonprofit. Not to say nonprofits are terrible, but they do often ask for more than they give, let's say. So the government job, I'm an hourly employee, I get paid hourly. If I work 12 hours, I get paid for 12 hours, I can get paid overtime. So that's mainly how I do it, is just I have a lot of control over my own schedule, and so I can manage it that way. Other questions?
Oh, you can go.
Oh, no, you go.
No, you go.
I can probably tell us later.
So obviously working for the government, have you ever found yourself like working in policy making on the side to help, fix some of the system that we've got going on? So.
Yeah, and like the biggest drawback of working in government, when I was your age, I used to be like, ugh, the government, who wants to work for the government? And state government, I will say, is a lot easier. I probably wouldn't work for the feds. But seeing policy making while it's happening is really interesting. It is also extremely slow, which is really frustrating. But we've been working on a new rule in Vermont for wake boats, which are those like big boats that you would water ski with. And the amount of public fighting about that has been really interesting to see and kind of be in the middle of. And also seeing the different advocacy groups in Vermont has been really interesting, but it has taken, 3 years to get this one rule made, just because of how I also have gotten to see how much your government workers really care about these issues and like want to protect the environment. I think that the government gets a bad rap because you see like the politicians are at the face of it, but really the people who are working in your government are just normal people who like want to do the right thing. And sometimes the politicians make it a lot harder. But yeah, so it has been really interesting to be involved in that and to see some of the rulemaking and the internal workings of the State House and having to go there occasionally. So, yeah.
Do you have to finish with your
I do. So next week is registration for the spring, and I'm curious, given you got the science piece, but you have all this working with people piece, and if there are students who might want a career along this way, whether it's in land trust or government or more human-facing rather than like bench-facing job. Were there classes at Wells that you thought set you up particularly well for the skills, whether that's communication, interpersonal?
That's a good question. I really feel like, at least when I was here,
Sort of the culture of Wells and the small classes and getting up in front of your peers and talking or doing group work, kind of across all of the different kinds of classes really helped. I think some of the stuff that sort of broadened my horizons a little bit and just gave me things that helped me connect with other people. I took a lot of history classes and a lot of English classes while I was here. And those just involved a lot of talking to people and a lot of learning about different kinds of people. I wish that I had taken a little more psych or sociology, and I didn't do either of those. But learning about the social sciences through working in this program and being like, wow, it really does work. Like, I was kind of a skeptic. So it's real. And I would suggest, taking some of those classes as well. Take all the classes. I wish I could go back and take classes now. Take everything.
I know. Like, you guys come to me and you're like, I don't know what to take. I'm like, how can you not know what to take?
Take everything. And also limnology. Whenever it gets offered, take limnology. You have such a valuable, important resource being right on the lake. Like, I used that in my interview. I said, my experience with lakes are that I lived on a lake for 4 years when I went to Wells College. We had the floating classroom. I took limnology. I learned so much from that class with Dr. Votter, and I'd take it, definitely take it. Like, you're never probably going to have that ability again. So.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.